joined by Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry Secretary Nancy Walker. And negotiations over the 2024-2025 budget are ongoing. What are your department's budget priorities for the next fiscal year?
Well, good afternoon, Phil. Great to be with you today. We are prioritizing people. You know, the governor talks about the freedom to choose, and we at Labor and Industry, we want to make sure that we are implementing programs and policies that support people in dreaming big dreams and making their plans for their own future and their workforce development or building their businesses, helping to make those things come true. So all sorts of workforce and business development programs.
Well, since the budget is about money, let's talk about how your department is funded. There's a mix of state and federal funds, correct?
That is correct. About 85% of our funding is federal funding, but the state dollars are really important dollars.
And as you're looking for your budget funding for this year, what types of things do you think your key funding areas are?
So for us, I think our key funding areas would be continuing to support our unemployment compensation program as we continue to work on enhancements to our functionality and how we provide services to the community. Also workforce development to really build on some of the initiatives the governor began last year to really touch as many people's lives and businesses as we possibly can, to continue to do our good work in labor law enforcement and to make sure that we have the resources we need to make sure that we're enforcing the laws across the Commonwealth. So those are probably our top three areas that we want to make sure we get funding for.
Now, the budget includes investing $1.2 million in the Bureau of Labor Law Enforcement. Talk a little bit about the types of labor laws that affect all of us who work in Pennsylvania and what is needed to actually enforce them.
Yeah, so that is such a great question, and I appreciate that because that's one of the key things that we really need to focus on. So just to put things into perspective, our labor law investigators, we have 27 investigators that enforce 13 laws across 67 counties. 13 laws, 67 counties, that's a lot of work. And over the last year, we saw about 5,200 complaints that were investigated, which is a 27% increase for us in the number of complaints that have come in. And what is particularly concerning to me is that we've had a 43% increase in the number of child labor violations. All sorts of reasons for that, including probably a tight labor market. But what's really concerning about that is they're not all administrative claims. It's not just a paperwork issue. Many of those cases are children that are in very dangerous situations. Things like 12-year-olds on commercial roofing projects, for example. We had one school district that was issuing work permits to 13-year-olds. So it's really important that we are able to have enough people to get to a place where we're getting a concerning report. But also we want to be able to educate our 500 schools that, about the rules about children in workplaces. We also have seen an increase in workplace misclassification. So that is a situation where an employer is calling someone an independent contractor when they're really an employee, or just simply looking for an excuse to pay people off the books. And in doing that, people aren't, employers are not making contributions to workers' compensation or unemployment compensation, federal, state, or local taxes. And we've seen a big uptick in those cases. So we're really looking to increase our complement so that we can attack, primarily those two areas. But again, we have 13 labor laws that we need to enforce across the state.
What kind of an increase in investigators would you like to see?
So what we'd like is we're asking for $1.2 million, which covers the cost of 12 additional investigators and then the supplies, materials, and things that would support those workers in the workforce. And we think that would really, that would be a third increase in our complement, and it would really help us to be more effective out in the workplace.
So I want to talk a little bit more about worker misclassification. How serious an issue is that?
It's a really big issue in Pennsylvania, and it's one that we are increasingly concerned about as time goes on. So, for example, our Unemployment Compensation Tax Service does audits, payroll audits, and last year did about 3,200 audits. They discovered over 13,000 misclassified workers. $4.3 million was not paid into the unemployment compensation system by those employers. And what that means for workers that are misclassified is that they don't get unemployment comp when they get laid off. If they get hurt on the workplace, they don't have workers' compensation. Their employer's not paying into Social Security or Medicaid, Medicare, and more importantly for many communities, those workers are not paying local taxes that pay for things like recreation centers and first responders and the kinds of things that the rest of us are paying for. And from a business perspective, it's a really big problem because if you're cheating on payroll, you could be saving maybe 30% of your costs. So what you're able to do, if you're an employer that's cutting corners and misclassifying workers, is you're able to get bids from, because you're the low bidder potentially on jobs where other law-abiding employers are not getting that work. So leveling the playing field is an important priority and something that's really important in that misclassification space.
If you're an employee, how would you know if you're being misclassified?
Well, certainly you can reach out to the Department of Labor and Industry, but if you are someone who's showing up to work, you don't have your own business, you're not incorporated, you show up and an employer tells you what to do and where to work and how to conduct yourself in the workplace, chances are you are not an independent contractor. So, for example, if at your house you need to have a pipe fixed, you call a plumber, and a plumber comes in and fixes the leaky pipe in your kitchen. You're not telling the plumber what tools to use. You're not telling them necessarily what time to be there. You're not telling them how to do their jobs. That's what they do. So it's the same for most of us in the workspace. If you're showing up to do the work of the employer at the direction of the employer, you are likely an employee.
So if an employee thinks that they're being misclassified, they can contact the Department of Labor and Industry?
They absolutely can contact the Department of Labor and Industry.
Many people may fear that if that's found out by their employer, they might be released. Are there remedies that can be implemented?
There are, and we can keep investigations confidential to some extent. And when an employer is misclassifying one worker, often they're misclassifying all of their workers. So, and sometimes it's not an intentional act by an employer. An employer just doesn't know. And again, having the additional complement of labor law investigators helps us to do educational outreach. So many of the complaints we get are situations where employers really don't understand how something works, how to calculate overtime under certain circumstances, or don't know that the person that they're having do a certain function is in fact an employee. So educating an employer is sometimes all it takes. Sometimes educating a worker so that they can educate an employer is all it takes. But again, the more we can focus on enforcement and the message gets out either that we are enforcing and that fines and penalties and fees and sometimes prosecutions are resulting, or just the more we get out there and educate the community, the less we'll see of misclassification. And we're also, because of so much federal money that's going to be coming into the state, having an adequate complement of labor law investigators, whether it's to enforce prevailing wage or to fight against misclassification, is really important. So under the Infrastructure Improvement and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, there's a lot of money and a lot of work opportunities that'll be coming into Pennsylvania. So we want to make sure that we are protecting workers and keeping a level playing field.
Once a complaint comes in, how does the investigation proceed?
So it's assigned to an investigator who then reaches out to the employer or reaches out to the employee, does both, sometimes requests documents, sometimes there's surveillance on work sites, any number of investigations depending on the kind of complaint that is being handed down. But again, often it's a matter of simply educating an employer about what the issues are. But we just need to have an adequate complement so that we can do that and so that we can send a deterrent message and that we can make sure that we're supporting workers and law-abiding employers. And honestly, Phil, to put that into perspective, New Jersey has 70% the population that we have. So they have 70% of our number of people. But they have 70 investigators. They're about to get 10 more and have 80, and they even have things like drones that help with their investigations. So it would make us better able to meet the needs of the folks in Pennsylvania and also to meet some of the needs in addition to the federal dollars that are coming in for some of the infrastructure improvements. We also know that Pittsburgh has been designated as a workforce hub, and then last week they also identified Philadelphia, the Biden administration, as a workforce hub. And it's really important that as more money and more opportunity are coming into areas, again, that we're able to make sure that we're protecting employers and competition in those spaces.
Now, one of the issues that emerged during the pandemic were long wait times for call services for unemployment compensation. Can you talk about the challenges you faced when you came into office and how you addressed those issues?
Thank you. Yeah, so when Governor Shapiro came in, one of his top line issues was really to address the unemployment compensation backlog and some of the complaints that we had heard, as we were coming into office in 2023. The day I walked into Labor and Industry, we had 40,000 backlog cases that had not been adjudicated, so claims that had not been decided. We had 34,000 backlogged fraud complaints. We had folks that were trying over and over and over again to get into a phone queue, sometimes as many as 20 times. And when they did get in, there was an hour and 20 or 30-minute wait to actually talk to somebody. So the governor really prioritized making sure that we got resources where we need to get resources at Labor and Industry in our unemployment compensation program to fix those things. So within 7 months, our 40,000 backlog claims had been brought down to zero. Our 34,000 fraud claims had been cleared. We were able to add an additional 380 folks to the intake interviewer position. Those are the folks that are answering phone calls. They answered 800,000 calls last year. We increased the number of ports by 50%. And we also tried really hard to meet people where they were. So in addition to telephone calls, we started an online live chat. We started emails where we were able to get back, if not in real time, certainly within 24 hours to people. And we also stood up a program called UC Connect. And that gave us the ability to put 2 intake interviewers, 2 folks from our UC staff, into career links, 58 career links across Pennsylvania 2 days a week. And that was really important for us. It gave our folks a chance to interact with the public, but it also gave people a chance to connect with a human being. So some people had smartphones but did not know how to use them. Some folks don't have internet access. Some people just don't have technology available. They want to be able to talk to a human being. They want to tell their story. Sometimes there were language barriers, so that's been really successful. And we were able to serve from May until the end of the year about 40,000 people. But among those various options, in addition to the phone calls, we were able to serve about 500,000 people. And back in February, one other sort of exciting addition that we added to our fleet of UC improvements was working with our Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And we started a help desk with 50 individuals with disabilities, including disabled veterans, who are answering phone calls. And they've answered about 10,400 at this point, where they're taking just very routine, how do I log on? How do I upload a document? How do I change a password? Very routine questions that really don't rise to the level of the work that our intake interviewers do, but really sort of lessens the burden on the phone lines. So that's been an exciting addition as well. So we appreciate the governor's continuing commitment to the work of unemployment compensation. He gets reports every week because this is very important to him, and we certainly hope that the legislature continues to help us fund the improvements that we've rolled out.
Since we're talking about budget issues, some of the funding for those 380 folks was provided by the Service Improvement and Infrastructure Fund.
That's correct.
Can you talk about the importance of that fund and how much additional funds are you looking for in the next fiscal year?
Yeah, so it's a great resource for, the federal dollars are just insufficient. Federal funding cannot give us what we need to really have the kind of service that the community and the legislature and businesses demand. This fund is a fund that's comprised of small contributions from employees as they work hour by hour. It adds up into this fund. This fund doesn't affect employer contributions. It doesn't affect businesses in any way. But it is a good source of revenue for these kinds of service improvements, of course, that we've been talking about. This year, in order to continue down the path that we are and to keep the staffing levels where we believe they need to be, at least based on what we project to be the needs of unemployment going forward, we're looking at an additional $68 million. So we've had good conversations with the legislature. We know this is something very important to the governor. So hopefully we're able to continue. This just seems like a very universal, something that everybody universally wants to make sure is working well. So hopefully that continuing funding happens.
Now, most recent numbers on unemployment show Pennsylvania's unemployment rate around 3.4%.
That's right.
Should unemployment services be staffed based? Should it fluctuate based on unemployment rates?
Well, and it always lags a little bit, right? So what we want to do is we want to be at a point where we have a sufficient number of folks to be able to staff the needs of unemployment through normal fluctuations, right? So there are times when unemployment's a little higher, a little lower. Pandemic is a hard kind of thing to staff for, but we think at this point we have a complement that's sufficient that we can add and, through attrition, maybe not fill all the positions all at once, so that we can be responsive to whatever those slight upticks or downturns in unemployment might be over a normal economic cycle.
Now, we talked about the call services, but just in general, can you give us a sense of the unemployment compensation system as a whole? What is its state?
I'm sorry?
What is the state of the unemployment compensation system?
So from our perspective, I think our unemployment compensation folks are extraordinary, and I think they're doing wonderful work, and I think that we are at a point where we have a good handle on the resources that we need to be able to be efficient and effective in that space. On a national level, we are continuing to be underfunded by the federal government, and that is consistent across all of the states. Every year, it's less money that we're given for unemployment, and by the time we have an uptick and we need more money, the money is slower than the need. So, it certainly is something that at a federal level should be given more attention, in my opinion. But I do appreciate how the legislature and the governor have focused on how we can do what we can as a Pennsylvania legislature to fix it.
How important are apprenticeship programs, and what kinds of programs does the department oversee? Oh,
that's a great question. Apprenticeship programs are really important, and the governor has just really focused so much on providing opportunities for people, particularly underserved communities. And this year we're looking we've made a budget request of $23.8 million, and registered apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship programs are this marvelous way for folks to earn as they learn, which gives you really the ability to be thoughtful about what you want to do with your career and to find really a good trajectory with family-sustaining wages and benefits. And we've seen back years ago when I sort of started in this space, apprenticeship programs were really just limited to the building and construction trades and manufacturing. There's still wonderful programs in those sectors, but we've seen over the last few years some really new sector, expansive, creative places for apprenticeship programs. So we've seen over the last year expansive programs in healthcare and STEM and technology. A few months ago, I was at an apprenticeship program where the young apprentices were learning to do computer game programming, which is really interesting. And I've just been told by our workforce folks that we have just certified a dairy herd manager program. So it's a lot of really creative, exciting opportunities in that space.
Who's eligible for those programs? So is there a certain age range, or is it more broad?
Very broad. So, our pre-apprenticeship programs are younger people and generally in school age, high school age folks. And apprenticeship programs could be available to anyone. Depending on the program, there may be prerequisites. You may have to pass for some of the trades, for example, you'd have to have a certain level of reading and math skills to be able to work with blueprints or to be able to do some of the measurements and configurations for the programs. But there's really, I like to think that there's an apprenticeship program for everyone. Anyone who's interested in sort of changing careers or expanding what they can do, there is a good program out there that'll tap into everyone's interest, I think.
Can you also talk about the Schools to Work programs?
I can. So Schools to Work is a great program, and last year was the first year where it was actually a budget entry, and the governor is asking again for $3.5 million in that space. So Act 158 created new pathways to graduation, so not just Keystone exams, but it gave young folks in high school alternatives, and career and technical education VOTEC programs became another option for students. So our Schools to Work program is a great way to connect young people with businesses in their communities. Sometimes they do, just visits to the businesses, or they'll do internships or externships or job shadowing. Sometimes they go to visit and they get an opportunity to fill out applications for work while they're there. But it's just a great way to connect young people with opportunities in their communities and to give businesses an opportunity to sort of pitch what they do to a young group of potential new workers.
Now, your department also is asking for $2 million for a new skills-based hiring initiative. How would that program like that work?
Yeah, so one of the very first things the governor did, I'm very happy, when he came into office, was to sign an executive order in the workforce space, which of course is our space. And what that executive order did is it did away with the mandatory requirement for college degrees for Commonwealth jobs. And so much, frankly, to my surprise, when we sort of drilled down to see what jobs are available in the Commonwealth, 92% of them did not require a college degree. And what that did is it opened up a lot of job opportunities to folks that otherwise wouldn't have been able to take advantage of them. And our jobs are good, family-sustaining wages with benefits. Many of them are union jobs. And I think what had happened was that we used college degrees to stand in for a measure of certain soft skills. So that, at least somebody with a college degree at least worked hard enough to get through a college program or was committed to something for 4 years, had a certain level of writing skills or ability to communicate. And what we want to do with this skills-based learning is take some of the lessons that we've learned as a Commonwealth in this space and be able to work with private sector employers to help them identify the skills that are actually necessary for jobs so that they're not just using a college degree as a stand-in for soft skills. And so we are looking to do that through education, through maybe some grant opportunities, but really looking to take what we've learned and put it into the private sector as well.
Now, your department also offers programs to help folks with disabilities do vocational rehabilitation. Can you talk a little bit about some of those programs?
Yeah, so our Office of Vocational Rehabilitation does just wonderful work, and we have a number of opportunities where we work with employers to get individuals with different kinds of skills and different kinds of needs into workplaces. We'll work with employers to actually help fund the employee for a period of time while they go through a learning exercise. We have summer camps for individuals that are young people who are hard of hearing, deaf or hard of hearing, and blind and visually impaired at Penn State so that they can see what it's like to be on a college campus and experience that. We have all sorts of internships and externships through the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. They really touch every aspect of the work community and help individuals with different abilities really be able to dream big dreams and have the supports they need to accomplish what they want to accomplish for their careers.
So since your department is funded with a mix of state and federal funds, do you have much say in the federal fund side of it? Is that something that's just sent to you from the federal government, or can you reach out to the federal government and try to leverage some of the options that are available to you?
Yeah, so there are all sorts of different rules that attach with different kinds of bundles of money, but there are some, particularly in our workforce space, there are certain discretionary dollars, state set-aside monies, that have rules generally that attach to them, but give us more discretion to really sort of apply grants where we think there are best opportunities to provide opportunities for people. We also have opportunities when money isn't spent by other states. There are often grant opportunities that are provided where we can sort of put together a proposal for use of that money, and we sort of apply for that, and we've been very successful in getting those grant opportunities, both in workforce and in our Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. So we certainly make use of all the dollars we're given, and we look for opportunities to get more dollars for Pennsylvanians, every opportunity.
How important is community service, and what types of community service programs does the department run?
So community service is very important. We have community service opportunities really throughout all of our workforce opportunities. We have internships and externships. We have Penn Serve, where we help our AmeriCorps. That's our AmeriCorps program, where we put people to work for periods of time, a year or 2 years, to go out and do community service work, either reentry community, use disorder, and all sorts of different aspects of the community. But we really have a robust program where we, even with our Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, we have a program in the summers where we have young people who are working with municipalities across the Commonwealth. So we really have sort of the opportunity to represent in all sorts of different aspects of community service.
Now, another part of your budget request is $2 million for a one-stop career exploration center. Tell us about that center.
So we have, Pennsylvania's Department of Labor and Industry have all sorts of opportunities for skills enhancement, for jobs, for postings from employers. And I'm told that my colleagues at the Department of Community and Economic Development, they have lots of opportunities. And I know my colleagues at the Department of Education have opportunities, and agriculture and environment. And what the governor really wants to do is, this is in keeping with having government work for people. And what he wants to have is a one-stop shop for somebody to just get on the website, access a specific site, and be able to look for whatever opportunities they want to find across government. Right now, you have to sort of know where to look in all these different websites and all of these different agencies to find sort of the career path or the information you need. And this is an opportunity for one stop, where you can look for what you want in one place.
Now, we only have a couple of minutes left, but I noticed on the Department of Labor and Industry website, it talked about some of the different areas of Pennsylvania labor where the department is inspecting things, and one of them was stuffed toys.
Yeah.
I had to ask about that. How does that work? What's involved there?
So that was a new one to me, too. So what we do is our Bureau of Occupational Industrial Safety is tasked with making sure that stuffed animals meet the statutory requirements and are not dangerous. So every year, every time a new stuffed toy wants to be able to be certified to be sold in Pennsylvania, they send it to our BOIS folks who check it out. And on occasion, there are bad toys that don't make it. And then the good toys that do make it, we collect them over the course of the year, and then we give them to, as part of a drive around the holidays. We send those off to children across Pennsylvania. But I had not appreciated that in addition to elevators and boilers, we looked at stuffed animals for safety reasons as well.
We've been speaking with Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry Secretary Nancy Walker. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Phil. Appreciate it.